The journey of spiritual formation is a journey of change, of transformation through the guidance of the Holy Spirit. So let's grow some deep roots of faith and join together for the next 40 days of soul searching, transforming, life-giving work, responding to God's call and exploring our life of faith.
Welcome back to the fourth session on your Lenten program. The first, the session we did last was about the fear and being free or being bound by fear. I think I asked you to consider some things and be aware of some things last week, so I want to just comment on that before we start. How did you do working on being in touch with your fear and being in touch with whether you would move to the side of being bound by the fear or being freed by the fear? So consider that. Today we've got another dynamic. The dynamic is movement between grudging and forgiving. So that's our work today, is to understand that and to take that in, and again to use that for our own transformation and then for the transformation of our behavior with other people around us. Grudging, let me state it this way, grudging is a social use of fear to protect oneself. You got that? A social use of fear to protect oneself. Now, in protecting oneself, do we do that in a manner that binds us or in a manner that frees us? That's a question that we have to answer. Regarding grudges, I happen to be of Irish descent, so there's a thing that we say to each other. You know, I might ask you the question. The question is, do you know what Irish Alzheimer's is? And you would probably say no. Maybe some of you do. Irish Alzheimer's is we forget everything but the grudges, and I think sometimes that transcends probably being of Irish descent. The problem with the grudges is they absorb us and they can take us over. And then again, we're not free. And why does it come about? What is the background for this? So what we've got up here is we've got the whole notion between binding and free again. But what is it that leads us to resort to or construct or invent grudges? Because as an Adlerian, I know that all of that is done purposely, and we do that as a result of a purpose that we think we have in our life, and then we behave that way with other people. I think it comes from feelings of and experiences of feeling like we're dismissed, or we're discounted, or we're disrespected, or we're treated unfairly. And then what happens is we take that in and we have a mistaken belief about that. And our mistaken belief is they did X, Y, Z to us. They dismissed us. They discounted us. Therefore, they don't think I'm very important and I am very significant. So in some ways, grudges are kind of a nonsensical way, and I use that word nonsense because Adler made the distinction between common sense and nonsense. So it is a nonsensical way to see if I can recover what I think I've lost. And so I do it by bearing a grudge or holding a grudge against that person. And you might say that that has an element of revenge in it. And what we know about revenge is, if you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. At its very basic, that's what it is. So the deal would be, what happens is, again, if we have the grudge and we're bound by the grudge, then what happens is we set distance. We split. We shun others. And the basic thing that we need to know is what God is about unity. The Trinity is united. We are supposed to be united. So what happens with the grudge is that unity is broken down. So the real solution here is, if we're free, we enter into forgiveness. And the forgiveness, the point of forgiveness then, is to reconstruct or reunite us. Now, what I wanted to do is I want to go back to, again, to the scriptural basis for this. Forgiveness is really talked about in Matthew 18, verses 12 through 16. And it's very apparent how the early church looked at forgiveness. And in a way, it's countercultural to what's going on in our country and how we look at forgiveness. The process starts in the scriptures by the person who is hurt going to the person who has offended them. And they say, this is what you've done, you've offended me and you've hurt me. If that person says, please forgive me, hold me sorry, I'm sorry for it, then that's finished. But the scriptures goes on, if that person does not do that, then the person who was hurt goes and brings two members of the community with them. And they say the same thing. You've offended me, you've hurt me in this way. If the person then says, well, forgive me, then that's done. If they don't, then this is where it gets very difficult, because then the person takes them in front of the community and does that same process. So it's very apparent that the early community could not be disunited. It had to be very united to survive. So when we look at this then, when we look at the forgiveness is started, as it says, by the person who's been offended, saying to the other person, you've offended me. At that point, the person who has offended has to realize, I did that. And they need to admit that. And for true forgiveness, they need to understand the effect that they've had on the other person, because then they will be able to ask for forgiveness from a position of empathy, not just from a position of practice. And then the person who is hurt has power. So if you look at forgiveness, the person who's offended is up here, the person who has been offended is down here. They say what they've said, and as that process starts, the admitting, the understanding of the effect and that kind of stuff, it starts to change. And when the question is asked, now the person who has been offended has the power. Because they can say yes, no, or yes, and I want something from you. And when that happens, then we bring the relationship back into more harmony and more unity. And now things have been altered. Things have been transformed. What was a situation of disunity has now been transformed to a situation of unity. So what I'd like to do is, again, as I did last time, I'd like to give you some work as you're out there. Here's what I'd like you to be aware of, and this may get into some of the fear as well. I'd like you to be aware of moments where you feel like you've been slighted. And then I'd like you to be aware is in those moments, are you more prone to move toward the side of holding a grudge or getting even? Or are you more likely to move to the side of seeking the person out and asking forgiveness? And when we get back together next time, I will ask you about that. So I hope you have a very good week.